One car represents maximum off-road capability and generates a wow effect like no other. I'm thrilled to be in Fuerteventura today. I'm happy this car is finished after a long development. Today we'll talk about it with Jörn. Let's have a look at it. The new 6x6 is finally here. Let's go. What kind of car is it?
It's an impressive car. Lots of wheels, axles, components, much of it new.
You can't put more wheels on a G. That's not a spoiler. This is the ENDBOSS.
The 6x6, of course, has a clear standing historically, both in terms of the G and the history of BRABUS.
It was certainly one of the most impressive BRABUS supercars. Many of the old 6x6s found their way to Bottrop and were completely rebuilt, both technically and visually. There was never a point, since the new G hit the market, where we either stopped thinking about building a 6x6 again, or customers and fans stopped asking us time and again whether we'd be making a similar car.
The question kept popping up when the XLP took off, since our G pickup has portal axles. We had already introduced the main characteristics of a 6x6.
Some people made the connection, the BRABUS XLP, XL for longer and taller, the P for pickup. It is the highlight we introduced in 2020. We could expect to develop it further, but you never know until it happens. Now it's here, and it has 2 more wheels.
And some other special features in the area of chassis and frame. We added a lot of new elements through innovation. We'll get into it in detail.
I was about to say, if we use a new G-Class as a base for such a project, the goal is not just to increase its off-road capability by adding 2 extra wheels at the back, basically adding 1 axle. We asked ourselves what we could do to further develop this car technically, to increase its performance, off-road capability, and make it technically more sophisticated.
Exactly.
A lot of changes.
A lot of changes, which we'll go over it in detail. A lot was changed in the back, but we'll start with the front.
You can tell right away this is not a normal G-Class. Anyone who knows our XLP 900 or the G900 Rocket Edition sees familiar elements. What did we do?
Let's start with the front. The BRABUS Widestar front skirt is a very well-known component used in various modifications and vehicles. We offer it as a Widestar kit for every G. The G900 and the XLP 900 has this front skirt. The P900 also has it.
It gives it an amazing, more masculine and sporty look.
I love the details like additional daytime running lights, carbon frames, but also the winch.
A detail in the front that stands out and shows this is a special G and pulls a lot.
Tons of pull.
So I can pull myself out with the winch regardless of where I am, if that's even necessary with this car. The front immediately shows the car is a very tall ride. It really has a lot of ground clearance. How much?
At the most vulnerable spot of the front axle, it's nearly 460 millimeters. It's at least 460 millimeters all over, even in the back. In the middle of the car, it's even more, so that's plenty. We installed the necessary underride protection on the car. In case the clearance isn't enough, I can slide over obstacles on these sheets because they provide appropriate protection.
It has the same height as the XLP because it's based on the XLP's portal axles. Development started with that. To be honest, we were 2 years ahead of the curve. The XLP made us figure out how to construct a portal axle system correctly. We did the same thing here, but developed it several steps further. We'll get into that in a bit. Let me sum it up. If you can't get through any given terrain with this car, it's almost impossible to get through with any car.
Yes, exactly.
It's a beast.
We have to mention the unmatched level of comfort. So this combination of off-road performance and driving comfort, even on bad roads, is an important point.
We knew it needs to be off-road capable. It must be comfortable and perform well. That meant a lot of work was invested on the suspension.
A lot of performance and maximum drivability, but also the desired comfort. We tried to merge both worlds. That's not easy and requires a lot of effort. The amount of shock absorbers for a car like this is crazy. We installed 10 shock absorbers. They're all electronically controlled. Compression and rebound are adjustable, including a complex sensor and control unit architecture to evaluate different driving conditions. It's very complex.
The old XLP didn't have one feature this one does: independent suspension on all three axles.
Exactly, that's a mega feature. I can't think of another word than mega because it's a first for a G.
Achieving that took complex developmental efforts because you don't want to compromise off-road capability. On the contrary, we do it so the car is as off-road capable as possible. That was one of the main areas we thought could be improved on. At the same time, you don't want to diminish driving comfort.
To this day, it hasn't been driven by the mainstream. Everyone who's driven it internally says it's a very normal ride experience.
XLP 900 6x6. We have already talked about XLP and 6x6. We'll have a look at that later, but the 900 is also important. Should we look at that?
Let me open it up.
.900 horsepower, 1,250 Newton-meter torque,
4.5 liter.
4.5 liter displacement, 8 cylinders. It's a recipe we think is good. That's why we copied it from the G900 Rocket Edition. Rather, its smaller brother, XLP 900. The 4.5 liter engine is back at it.
Exactly, it's a popular engine, as you mentioned.
At this point, I'd like to compliment our engineering for the last 2 or 3 years. When was it introduced? I think the Rocket GT was the first car. I remember being amazed by the engine. We've installed this engine family in a variety of BRABUS supercars.
The engine performs extremely well and is installed thanks to the Mercedes engine strategy in almost all models that are interesting and important for us. It's effortless, powerful, and emotional, but also offers good fuel efficiency because of its direct injection and variable displacement.
It complies with all standards we have to meet in Germany and worldwide.
The current Euro 6 standard with a particulate filter. So everything that is required and mandatory in 2023. It's a great engine, and most of all what's important for me regarding this topic, it's based on a classic engine construction. We increased its displacement from 4 liter to 4.5 liter. We worked on the block, increased bore and stroke, new pistons, connecting rods, and crankshaft. It's what we did traditionally many decades ago, well before the times Mercedes started using turbo engines. The only way to increase power, as the saying goes, you can only substitute displacement with more displacement. We have remained true to that. I'm still very happy with the engine. It does everything it needs to do.
We talk a lot about engine balance. BRABUS is not just about making engines stronger and bigger. There are always people who come to us and want cars with 1,000, 1,500, or 2,000 horsepower. I have to be quite clear. Technically, that is possible. But it is not possible within the framework of what we as a company regard as useful. We only do that as a one-off and have to consider durability and street legality. We would have to make compromises that we don't want to make. When we design an engine, it is a product that has to work not only in Germany, but also here in what is known as hot country. Fuerteventura is a good example. It also has to work in much hotter countries. It has to be transportable and work anywhere. We have to consider many criteria besides pure engine power. Anyone will understand that. You don't buy a car like this to take it for a spin, drive on the highway twice, and expect it to have a busted engine. That is why 900 horsepower is the current maximum we're offering. You always understate it and just call it an effortless engine. The engine is not effortless, it's absolutely sensational. I'm a very relaxed driver. People say that you cannot drive 320 kilometers on the highway all day, or 300. I then always answer, they're missing the point. It's about having an engine that lets you shift down, tap the gas slightly, and feel how it surges forwards. Sounds great and has real power. The power of this kind of engine can be felt across the entire rev band. Sometimes it's best to just drive around at low revs and enjoy how the engine works. You can constantly feel its displacement.
Its torque and responsiveness make it a joy to drive. That's its strength and the reason we added 500 more CCM. That helps its responsiveness and increases base torque. The engine with its emotionality and power delivery is precisely why.
The topic's engine balance, smoothness, and the connection, which is different between performance and comfort, has always played a major role at BRABUS. We've always built fast cars that work as a daily driver. They have great comfort and make you feel comfortable. They don't rattle and bounce. It was harder to achieve for this car because it's a massive off-roader, not an E900, which means a completely different approach.
Its top speed of 210 kilometers per hour is electronically limited because the 22-inch off-road tires set that limit. It's effortless and performs well. For a car of its size, that's really incredibly fascinating. It's a power view hood.
Funny you should say that. I wouldn't have mentioned it and moved on. It's a new detail. We've already presented 850 cars together, but it still feels new. I think it's a detail that became normal very quickly. And we've seen a lot of cars. It's so well integrated that you sometimes walk past it and only notice it at second glance. However, it is cool to see the engine through the glass.
Here's the engine cover with red carbon. The red or black carbon differentiates between 800 horsepower and 900 horsepower.
If it's red, it's 900 horsepower, and if it's black, it's 800 horsepower.
Exactly, and they're very visible. You can also see the effort of creating such a window and opening, not only from the outside with the hood attachment, which visually corresponds exactly to what we offer as an aftermarket accessory for every G. You can also see this massive large carbon insert. We place the air inlets here. Air flows through the slot in the hood attachment and channels into these outlets, which supply the engine with air to improve engine compartment ventilation.
Let's address a discussion we often encounter online. These slots in the hood are, of course, functional in the XLP 900 6x6. As with the P900, they always have been. They're functional.
All air that flows in here at the front, it looks like it's closed. There is a separator in the back. We always have the issue of water entering the area. You don't want water in the engine compartment. That wouldn't be good. That's what the separator is for. The air impacts here is fed away laterally, and the water is led away via another vent, so that no water can enter the engine compartment. You can't avoid it completely, but we can separate it well. Air enters here, passes through channels in the component to the underside of the hood, and is then channeled through those slots into the engine compartment, the left and right of the engine. That improves the ventilation of the engine compartment and ensures better thermals.
Jörn, we talked so much about the engine, let's talk about what makes this car special. Let's close this. It's such a massive car. 6.2 meters? That's crazy.
Yes, that's just nuts.
This is not a toy.
No, definitely not. The 3 axles, the 6 wheels. The wheel houses give a good view of its technology. We made a conscious decision to visually contrast all modified parts of the chassis, frame, and suspension. We chose gray as a color. That makes explaining what's new simple.
Everything that's gray is new. Independent suspension on all 3 axles. How many absorbers are there? 10?
There are 10 absorbers, 1 per wheel on the front axle, just like the XLP. The rear axle. The independent suspension consists of a dual system, 2 absorbers per wheel. They're all electronically controlled. Compression and rebound are adjustable via control system with a complex sensor array on the car. We installed acceleration sensors at different locations on the frame, chassis, suspension, and wheel mounts. The acceleration sensors evaluate the car's driving state and its body movement status. If you drive on a wavy or bumpy road, it makes adjustments via its elaborate software. These are 2 control units. Usually you have 1 control unit for all absorbers. No control unit can control 10 absorbers.
It's a highly unusual setup. The original 6x6 had 2 rigid axles at the back. When we started the project, that was the main point of attack. If we want to make this car even more off-road worthy and increase its performance, we have to make a move and install independent suspensions on all the axles. You just started to explain how complex that makes this system. You can't just add an axle in the back. You have to integrate everything and tell the car it now has 3 axles. You have to first develop the technology and harmonize it in such a way that in the end, when you drive the car, you end up with a homogeneous overall impression.
Exactly. This topic has different levels. There's the mechanical level, which means building an independent suspension. You have to design and develop it, map the kinematics because you define the wheel movement with the control arms. You have nothing and start from scratch. Of course, we were able to copy a few things from the front. The XLP has an independent suspension in the front, which is installed in every new G. So we weren't quite in a vacuum, but we had to design new control arms, wheel mounts, and portal casings. We could copy some of it from the front. So the mechanical setting comes first, with everything that goes with it. You also need frame adapters. The frame doesn't have independent suspension points. The frame had to be strengthened. We have built a very special subframe, which is attached to the modified, extended, and rebuilt stock frame at the back, to find attachment points for the control arm to grab onto. There are no standard points for it. We had to engineer 2 absorbers per wheel from scratch as well. Otherwise, there is no attachment point to install them on. That covers the mechanical setting, but only the chassis. The next one is a rigid axle with a differential and a drive shaft in the axle tubes.
All these problems show up if you want to build a 6x6. We talked a lot about the chassis, but if you want to realize an independent suspension on 3 axles and end up with a drivable car, you have to address more than the chassis. For example, the drive, the differentials, differential locks, and so on and so forth, which you put a lot of work into.
You're exactly right. The normal rigid axle has an integrated differential inside the axle tubes and corresponding drive shafts. That's gone. Just like the chassis didn't have attachment points for the new chassis components, the drive didn't either when we decided to switch from rigid axles to an independent suspension, so we have new differential housings for both axles. The first rear axle is a power driver axle because you're transferring from the front through the first rear axle via the transfer gearbox. You split left and right through a differential and connect the third axle with another output drive, where it goes back into a differential via the drive shafts to the wheels. None of those housings existed. The drive wheels didn't exist. Gear wheels and bevel wheels weren't available and had to be conceived. New housings had to be engineered and designed. When you develop a drive, there are new gears and differentials, so noise emission is a topic. Does it whine or make any other noises?
One of the normal topics anyone faces with off-road vehicles is noise generation. What does it sound like? Is it too loud? How much of a compromise do you make? We wanted to compromise as little as possible.
That worked out well, and it performs well off-road and on the road due to the independent suspension and its elaborate chassis. Let me cover the topic differential locks. With 3 axles and 6 wheels, there's a huge amount of locks. Simply put, the differential lock firmly connects the corresponding wheels, or rather the axles. I'll explain it for a transverse lock on an axle. You're in an off-road situation. One of the 2 axle wheels is unloaded. A normal, open differential would always drive this unloaded wheel.
So you're standing on a sloping terrain, or you're driving over a rock,
or over a patch of ice,
and one wheel has no or little ground contact.
The differential would, through torque compensation, always drive the wheel with the lowest friction coefficient, which then spins idly.
So performance goes to waste.
Exactly. You can't move forwards. With a differential lock, you block the torque compensation and then distribute the force equally to both sides. So the force is distributed everywhere. So if you have 2 wheels with different coefficients of friction, the wheel with the highest coefficient of friction provides forward traction. You switch that electronically. It's a feature of the G because it's super comfortable and makes a huge difference off-road.
It will help you get through anywhere.
Exactly. Then add 3 axles, 6 wheels, and the entire contact surface. And a feature we'll get into in a moment. The tire pressure control system. And you end up where we are. But again, you need a lot of electronics because all axles have to be controlled in each situation. You could break a lot with an unsophisticated setup. If in certain moments the locking toothing gets locked under a big load, it would lead to overload breakages. That is why under certain circumstances, just like with the stock G, you can only switch to neutral at certain limited speeds. Our components make use of that because it's comfortable and easy to just press a button. In that case, it's dangerous because it's technically complicated and difficult to find the right moment to do so without violent force. Normally, the G has a central lock that connects both axles. We've installed a rear and frontal lock, and that's the famous.
The classic 3 buttons. In case someone asks what these 3 central buttons do in the center console of the G-Class, which are not normally used in road traffic. They lock the differentials when you're off-road, to either solve a problem up front, in the back, or with all wheels.
The escalation procedure during off-road use calls for first using the central lock, the transfer case, then the first transverse lock on the rear axle. And if you're still stuck, you lock the front axle. So we had to design an additional transverse lock for the third axis. So we decided to make the third axis switchable via a blocking element. During normal road conditions, the third rear axle is not switched on. It's decoupled from the normal drive. That increases its maneuverability, makes making U-turns and taking tight turns, like switchbacks, easier.
It just rolls along.
Exactly. If you're off-road with the central lock engaged and then switch on the rear transverse lock, the third lock is also engaged. These switching options are available. In addition, there's the option to activate the rear transverse lock. It is very modular and harmonized selectively for all driving conditions and situations. So you have both. Either drive on the road or park in tight spaces, which would be difficult with all the axle components, tension and self-locking present in such a system. But when you're stuck, you have the option to lock everything, which gives you unlimited off-road traction and the ability to drive up a mountain.
If you're stuck, take the 3-axle truck. Oh, nice one. Your comments on the drive and chassis make me realize this is a very special car. We've always had many discussions about suspensions, drive, engines, interior, exterior, wheels, etc. The level of detail on this Tech Talk, as I'm sure you've realized, is a whole lot higher, because this car underwent so much development, and because it was so demanding to realize our goals. That's why it's a special car. I think that a lot of people were really wondering, what is so complicated about a G-Class with 6 instead of 4 wheels? I think your 5-minute explanation helps people understand perfectly. Let's start at the beginning. A car with 6 wheels instead of 4 wheels is a better off-road vehicle? Why is that?
Because you have more wheels and more contact surface, which allows you to drive out of a situation. As the expression goes, the only connection a car has to the ground are the small footprints of the tires. Off-road capability calls for traction and rubber on your surface to drive off, especially here on Fuerteventura, with extremely stony, gravelly terrain, where you have to drive over rocks and hardly have any traction. It's even difficult to walk here. Every wheel, every contact surface will help you, like a centipede that easily distributes weight, traction, and strength. Such a 6-axle car has a huge advantage. Also important is the interlacing.
Let's explain to the audience. Interlacing is the position of the axles in relation to each other. Torsion, if you imagine a line from front to back through the car, is how that line is twisted. So torsion that occurs throughout the whole vehicle.
Exactly. Plus different compression, travel on the left, right, front, and rear, where every wheel is in a weird position because I'm driving over a rock. With 6 wheels, one of them always finds traction somewhere. If 2 wheels have little traction on a 4-wheeler, you're missing 50%. But here you have 4 out of 2 if 2 are lost. Lost in the sense they don't have enough surface contact.
You have 50% more.
Exactly. That's it. Differential locks, its ground clearance with the portal axles will of course also play a role. An important point is the tire pressure control system. It's an option we offer for the car.
Let's go back to a topic you mentioned in passing. We've already explained this for the XLP. It's very helpful. The term portal axis is new to many because everyday life on the street never brings you in contact with it. But the moment you need ground clearance, portal axles become very, very important. What is a portal axle?
Shall we go?
Let's look in the back. As we can see, portal axles deal with ground clearance. As the name suggests, we are building a portal. There are a lot of components that you can see from the front. Jörn, lead us through.
I'll do that.
Portal Axle 101.
Like you said, a portal means I have to go up, over, and down.
So that I have more space under the car and can off-road better.
Exactly. usually in the middle of the wheel. About here is where the drive shaft attaches. That point can be moved up via suitable gears, which are these portals. The center of the wheel, where the normal wheel bearing is, and also the center of the brake disc, is still on this plane. You can see here that the drive shaft attaches far above it. Between them there are suitable gears, which distribute the force from the drive shaft down into the portal, and then transfer it to the wheel hub. So why do this? So that all the load-bearing components which take away space and clearance are moved upwards. So only the control arm and damper linkage of the independent wheel suspension remain down here. You can see it in the middle of the vehicle. Here's a prominent protective plate, which is not only under-ride protection, but also load-bearing. This location of the subframe offers the maximum ground clearance, where you would centrally drive over rocks and obstacles. That's the advantage of it. And as I mentioned earlier, even if you slide over an obstacle, this massive stainless steel sheet protects all essential frame parts.
We've just discussed two topics. We've talked about chassis and drive. The whole thing is, of course, held together and controlled by a lot of electronics. You can already see one of our acceleration sensors. Jörn, tell us the significance of electronics on this car.
I can do that, starting with the chassis, since we just talked about portal axles. You just mentioned the acceleration sensor and pointed it out on the wheel carrier. All 10 absorbers on the vehicle are electronically controlled. This electronic control happens during rebound and compression, depending on driving situations. It might drive fast on the highway, off-road, over heavy obstacles, or just on a gravel road. To control these absorbers as needed, we need relevant information. We've placed various acceleration sensors on the wheel carriers, on the frame, and on the body on points that are important to us. These acceleration sensors detect relevant forces and movements that occur. For example, on the corresponding wheel where it's positioned, or up to the frame. It evaluates the driving situation with complex software and corresponding control units. With the help of characteristic curves, defined absorber control takes place in rebound and compression. We have 10 absorbers. Usually there's one control unit for the chassis control, or rather, the absorber control. We couldn't find a control unit that can regulate 10 absorbers.
Just a bit more than usual.
You don't have the amount of outputs. Everything is always designed for 4, maybe 6, with 2 in reserve, but never for 10. So we installed 2 control units. A master and slave would share the function accordingly.
So, a leading control unit, and one that creates more capacity and executes what the leading controller tells it to do. A so-called master and slave.
So we've supplied all absorbers even for this very unusual architecture. It's integrated in the CAN bus of the vehicle because in addition to acceleration sensors, we also get information from the vehicle. How fast am I going? How do I have to adjust the chassis? What kind of steering movement is there? Am I steering at all? How quickly am I steering? That's also an important parameter. If you drive slowly in a parking lot or off-road, you don't need excessive damper forces to stabilize the vehicle or the body. So I need to know things like the steering angle and how quickly am I getting to that steering angle. If I execute an evasive maneuver on the highway,
I need a different reaction than in the parking lot or off-road. All that is exciting, as a lot of people are not aware of it, I think. Here's a car with 2 or 3 axles. You get in, turn on the engine, turn the steering wheel, and drive. You don't worry about the role of electronics. Most people think a car is made up of mechanical parts. Wheels that are attached to axles, then transfer the power from the engine and spin the wheels. So the engine spins the wheels. That's only half the truth for modern vehicles, especially a monster like this one. Without electronics, nothing would spin at all. Certainly not in a way that's drivable.
A lot of systems are involved, for example, the drive control, engine, transmission, and drive control units, comfort electronics, air conditioning, telematics, and multimedia in the vehicle. These are all different subsystems that communicate with each other via CAN bus, LIN bus, Flex bus, and LAN. There are systems we had to add to the vehicle because the stock chassis control unit can't control 10 absorbers. We don't have the freedom of programming as utilized today. We have discussed differential locks and how to control them. All of that is independent electronics, which must be integrated into the existing infrastructure of the G. That brings us into the area of CAN bus and CAN bus networking. We're connected to the whole vehicle to get all the information we need.
We've talked about many topics, but some are still left. Wheels, carbon fiber, tire pressure control unit, also exciting. We haven't looked at the interior, but we have an advantage in Fuerteventura. What's better than one XLP?
2 XLPs.
A black one and a white one. And I think there it is. We're back with a beautiful black car and a beautiful white car. We brought 2 cars to Fuerteventura, namely the black XLP 900 6x6 and the white XLP 800 6x6. Because we want to test both engines in this terrain. Which do you prefer?
I know which one you prefer, so I won't even ask.
That's very simple. Of course it's the black one. That goes without saying.
To be fair, I like the white one a lot as well. But of course, the black one is great.
You always say the components show up better on the white one.
The contours show up more.
You're right. You're always, or often right.
Not always.
Let us talk about the topics we didn't address with the black one. One of them is carbon fiber. We used a lot of carbon fiber, not all of which is visible. Let's look at the cargo bed.
You're right, the whole side panel, the whole fender, except for the visible carbon fiber parts here, is painted carbon fiber. It's one of the largest carbon fiber components we make together with CSP, our subsidiary, that produces carbon components. The side panel installed on the crawler is also quite impressive.
Those are the 2 largest components we've produced so far.
We did something special. Normally, like we did with the Wide Star, the fender widening, this area here, is separate. Here we used a single component. It's a single component from front to back, down to this edge.
Another level technically.
Absolutely. Its depth, its length.
The overall dimensions. The moment a component goes from being 2D to 3D, it becomes more and more complex and tricky.
Exactly this is a crucial component. It covers the much larger cargo bed compared to the XLP 800 or 900. Not 6x6, but 4x4. You can see the size of the cargo bed. Here's a massive 2-part metal roll bar, similar to the one installed on the XLP. It's a dual configuration because of the length of the cargo bed. We needed some.
It's much longer than the 4x4 XLPs.
Exactly, so there are 2. Here's a special component. Let's zoom in on this frame.
Not the visible carbon fiber part, but the frame around it.
It's completely made of carbon fiber, goes around the entire car, and is designed to create a nice visual transition to the cabin.
When discussing the XLP, we talked about proportions a lot. In this case, the cargo bed and everything to its front has to fit together proportionally, so the car ultimately creates a homogeneous overall impression. This component definitely supports that idea by creating a clean transition.
Yes, plus it pushes the cabin to the rear. We had to try different configurations until the proportions became as suitable and harmonious as the XLPs. I have to mention one thing in this context. The overhanging in the back is shorter. You'll remember we extended the XLP 4x4's overhang to improve its proportions.
To lengthen the cargo bed.
Exactly. Here it's not necessary as much because the wheelbase and axles
Provide enough space.
Exactly. That's why you see the G standard overhang again.
There's a main difference between the white one and black one. It has a tire pressure control system, which lets me decrease or increase tire pressure with the push of a button. We'll have a look at it and talk about the wheel as well.
That's another special feature. I'll start with the wheel. Our range includes different wheel designs for the 6x6. This is the brand new monoblock ZHD. We chose the well-known BRABUS monoblock HD for the black XLP 900 6x6. There is no way to connect a tire pressure control system. Our 20-inch wheel and tire variants have always had the option to connect a tire pressure control system. This version of the monoblock ZHD now offers the possibility to combine 22-inch wheels with a tire pressure control system. Previously, that wasn't possible with the 22-inch BRABUS monoblock HD.
You can tell by how it looks, it's a wheel that tends to withstand more than many of our other wheel designs. It was specifically designed for off-road use. Comparatively many and thick spokes, a lot of material. This thing is really solid, and therefore suits a car like the 6x6.
On the one hand, we considered its static design because of the high axle and wheel loads such a car has, but also the topic of dynamics. It's being driven off-road, but sometimes at high speeds as well. We drove it on open sand at well over 140 kilometers an hour yesterday. These stresses have an impact on both tire and rim materials. They have to be designed so they can withstand these loads. Here's a special feature. We need an air channel for inflating and deflating the tire. We have to internally connect the rim well to the well hub. There's a bore in one of these spokes. Don't ask me which one. The bore runs inside from the rim well to the center of the wheel hub. Behind this cover is the connection for the tire pressure control system, which runs via the wheel hub.
Let's just open it up. Now we can see.
We opened it up. We removed the cover.
Now we can see where the bore is.
Yes, in this case, we have to rack our brains again. It's just like you said. Here's the bore which goes through the spoke and then runs into the rim well. The air supply runs through there. Here, in the wheel hub, is the connection to the tire pressure control system. One of our 4 corresponding pressure accumulators is connected here. It's a tank that stores pressurized air. We've installed 4 of them in total. The compressor is located behind a panel of the cargo bed. It pressurizes this system. When deflating, the air is discharged into the environment. When inflating, air from the pressure accumulators is added via this hose. We found a cool solution for pressure control, which is prioritized in development. We use stock tire pressure sensors. It's the mandatory ones installed in any car these days, the tire pressure monitoring sensors. We import the data via CAN. It's fed into a control unit with suitable circuitry and electronics. You then select road pressure of 2.3 bar, for example, down to 1.1 bar for off-road pressure. Here's one more important thing. All our rims designed to connect to a tire pressure control system have a special design in the rim well regarding the rim hump, the edge that retains the tire on the rim from the inside. It's a so-called extended hump, which means it's larger than the ones used on standard rims. It prevents the tire from jumping into the rim well from the side. You would normally risk the tire jumping off the rim if the air pressure is too low, so that's being prevented. The minimum air pressure is 1.1 bar for the 6x6. It's monitored by electronics. That's the minimum setting. It also has speed monitoring. If you drive faster than 100 kilometers per hour for some time, the pressure is automatically raised to the road pressure setting.
This is proof that a lot of electronics play a role in this car. It brings up a topic we mentioned earlier, a vehicle's surface contact area which connects it to the ground. It's why we deflate the tires when going off-road. This is a component, an option and feature I need if I design this vehicle for maximum off-road capability. More than it already is because of the additional axle. I need to include the tire pressure control system because it enables me to tweak the contact surface. That's why you deflate the tires when you drive into the desert or on terrain like this, when you drive in difficult off-road terrain, to maximize the contact surface so you can utilize it more or utilize it better to keep moving. That's what it's all about.
You hit the nail on the head.
The fact that we've explained more features on this car than during any other Tech Talk before explains the fact that it's taken a really long time to get to one of my favorite topics, the interior. We've installed exciting interiors in both vehicles. We normally like to present vehicles like the XLP 900 6x6 in 2 different color configurations. We did it with the Rocket GT and the G900 Rocket Edition. We're doing it again with the 6x6, the 900 in black, the 800 in white, to show the different impact various colors have, and to give a representation of 2 different interiors. At launch, 2 exterior colors and 2 different interior configurations are available. One of them has the tire pressure control system, the other one doesn't. Let's have a look. Open up so we can look at the interior.
That's right.
You notice the running board extending.
It's a bit noisy right now because there's a lot of sand in it. It's been used a lot.
You really need them for this car. Both cars have different interpretations of the interior, but they're the same in scope, even if the colors are different. The 900 is all black with gray accents. This one is all about contrasts. The exterior is white, the interior black. We've added a lot of beautiful red elements, including all of the glaze parts, which really stand out, of course.
Like you said, there's a lot of contrast. The black with red glaze is not an unusual combination. We've already used it in the G900 Rocket Edition. I think it is good and important that we show 2 cars. Something with a little and something with a lot of contrast. At the end of the day, customers can decide what they want.
These are 2 proposals and launch colors. That doesn't mean you have to configure the car this way. Anyone who configures a 6x6 can choose freely. Few companies reach deeper into the trick box and configuration box than we do. It happens again and again. This sort of one-off philosophy BRABUS is known for. We make everything possible and want to be those who don't say no, whether it's a special exterior color, crazy color and material concepts for the interior. The list goes on and on. We've made a lot of things possible as long as they're safe.
Exactly, that's always the top priority. Of course, features like airbags have to be included. We secure them, which is why there are restrictions regarding some seams and seam lines. They have to be the way they are because they are functional seams, but the rest is freely selectable. You can choose from different tucks, double stitching, even thread thickness. We can make all that possible on request.
Let's get in.
We'll jump in.
It's a BRABUS masterpiece, as with any major release, meaning we've installed everything.
Exactly, everything we can, everything we offer. The complete scope, including headliner, sun visor, e-pad, center console, door panel, seating.
How many individual parts are we talking about? You completely take this car's interior apart and work on it in some form before putting it back together.
If we break it down, I can comment on assemblies, but that doesn't list every single panel of the seat.
Give me the total.
We have a total of 180 main part numbers for the interior, some of which are subdivided 5 times. That means well over 1,000 parts, only leather. Since it's a G model, add just under 280 parts of glaze.
That means we touch thousands of G-class parts to build the 6x6.
All of that makes it super elaborate. Just look at the steering wheel. We have to disassemble each of these little switches, disassemble the switch units, every single component, down to the smallest frame, so that the glaze can be applied. Afterwards, everything gets reassembled. It goes through quality assurance beforehand and afterwards.
It does look like you'd expect a piece of jewelry to look like. I mean that literally. It looks exactly like you would expect a high-quality watch, earrings, bracelet, or necklace to look. Every detail, precision mechanics are involved, looks exactly as it should in the end. At the end of the day, that always gives an impression. That answers all questions when you get into the car. The impression is overwhelming.
The scope, the complete approach, even the red. I'm always a fan of this red glaze. Combined with black, it makes for a great appearance. Other manufacturing processes contribute as well. There's the topic of quilting, perforating, position perforating, embroidery, which is visible very clearly in the door panels, combined with our most recent leather design, theme embossing. You can see it on the sun visor. We embossed our brand pattern, the inverted 77. We embossed BRABUS lettering in the inside of the center console. There is no, I don't know, I may be wrong, but I don't think there's a typical leather working and design process we didn't use.
Everything's included. That's exactly what a BRABUS masterpiece is all about. Amazing grained leather, which creates more structure and depth and looks great. Red tucks and piping in different places. Amazing red glaze parts. You can see some of them here, the small logos on the air nozzles, which are in intricate parts that look great. Remember, making everything red is not the problem. To put everything together in the car, in the same color side by side, is a huge challenge. We're dealing with hundreds of parts. The combination of carbon fiber and leather on the steering wheel really looks opulent, and of course our Panerai clock. Integrated as always.
A very nice detail.
The door panels are sensational, with a combination of embroidery, quilting, and metal logo. Once again, this worked very well. We did it for the first time in the GLE 900 Rocket Edition, using this variant, black with red. It has become one of my favorite configurations.
We also need to talk about our new quilting pattern. New, in quotation marks.
That's right.
It's not new to our group, including all activities. The triangle originates in BRABUS Marine and is being used in a car for the first time.
It looks completely different because of the red dart. Normally we use it on the Shadow 900 with a different base material because we have to deal with effects caused by the sun, salt, or sweat, all the things you encounter outdoors. This is a great example of how different areas of our company complement each other. In recent years, many innovative ideas were applied to the boat. Now they're coming back. The more segments we attend to, the more we can share ideas. From cars to motorcycles, from motorcycles to boats, then back to cars. I'm curious to see what's next. It's one of the most complex cars we've ever built, and one of the longest tech talks we've ever done together.
I'm totally exhausted.
I think even the longest. This thing is absolutely sensational. We put so much work into it, and it has so many features. We really needed the time.
You have to take the time so that you can explain everything. I am super curious to see how the car will be received when we present it.
On June 29th at the Signature Night 2023. I look forward to the event because there are so many innovations.
Yes, we still have a lot of irons in the fire. What's left to say?
We still have to drive it. Because we took so long, we won't do that in this Tech Talk, but in a separate video. We'll take it for a spin in Fuerteventura. Thanks for your patience.
All the best.
See you next time.